And the area they most often talked about was situational awareness. You know, Tim did that. The Civil Air Patrol idea did that. There's a number of things up here that have to do with public safety situational awareness. So I thought there was probably some kind of a grouping or maybe an app in here. And maybe that app is something like, think about the server having, for those of you who are more technical, an in-memory database that has pictures and text items and other things that are located geographically on a map, also located on a timeline, may have some reputational veracity, so lots of people think that this is important for the situation, and it's kind of voted higher in terms of being more important. And then you can imagine being able to look at this set of situational awareness data in a geographic way, and then maybe use the technique I just talked about to look at more detail. Some of the best work that's been done on user interface information has been done by Ben Schneiderman at the Human Factors Interface Lab, and he says you start with an overview. Then from that overview, you go and zoom in, or you focus on a particular axis like time, or most important, or location, and then you mouse over to get detail. And that's the best kind of user interface. So I'm imagining that kind of a user interface for this kind of situational awareness data, so that you get an overview. You can then kind of zoom in or take a look at time or place or importance or reputation, or maybe there's some other axis or factor I'm not thinking about. I'm just trying to be notional here. I'm not trying to be prescriptive. I'm just trying to get you to think notionally about this. Come up with better ideas than I have. And then you get to see more detail by taking your mouse and putting it over that, or on a touch screen, touching your touch screen at that spot, so that you can see more detail on what that actually is. So if it's an actual node, you'd see the node. If it was an image, the image would be there. And what would be great for first responders and for folks trying to get information about a complex thing that's gone on, maybe people have sent in pictures from their cell phones. If you could go and get a very quick idea by just running your mouse over and using the gigabit fiber to go and show you the pictures they took. You know, I can see going across that map, and the pictures are going pop, 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 as you kind of mouse over that to get a better idea of what's going on. And say, hey, wait, let me look at that picture. And then you can kind of go and look at that picture in more detail. You can click on it, that picture goes up and shows you on the whole screen, so you can see more detail on that picture. But you were able to kind of sort through the pictures by just kind of mousing over and getting all that information transferred very rapidly. Maybe there's an in-memory database behind that, so that you can have very, very rapid response to what's going on. There could also be a timeline where you see what's going on in the timeline, or maybe a time slider maybe under a map, so that you can have both the map and the timeline at the same time. I'm just, imagining things that would be all very interesting and very gigabit.
One of the things that I, just to tack onto that, was I did a kind of a social network picture search engine at one point in time. Just harvesting images from Facebook and Twitter and then indexing them by the words talked about. But one thing I noticed was on the heavy usage days of the website were always disasters. And they're always searching for very specific keywords for the photos. Examples would be some of the flooding and the not typhoons, but the tidal waves that were happening in Southeast Asia. I had a massive amount of Southeast Asian people coming to my website searching for victims, searching for information about it, and they were getting grids of pictures. And I think social network can kind of give you that almost first responder level picture before somebody that can document it. And it's all geotagged and contextual with their thoughts and feelings, and you can gather information from that.
And you can imagine that eventually this is going to come from mobile devices, which automatically provide the time tagging, automatically provide geotagging. And then you can imagine a crowdsourcing thing to assign the reputation. So people could, from their homes, and this is why the gigabit of the home is useful, be able to pull these up and say, I think this one is more important for somebody to go look at than another one, because this shows something we need to take care of right away.
And I think sentiment analysis might be interesting there too. Like, what message did the user actually say when they saw the image? Did they convey a feeling of urgency, criticalness, sadness, you can kind of get priority from that too. Sorry,
Sure.
interjecting a lot of information here.
No, we're just free associating here. You could put a colored border around the picture depending on how important it was. You know, red picture is really important. You know, blue picture's baseline. I don't know. There's all kinds of things you could possibly think about doing there. And then it occurred to me that this kind of public safety situational awareness app is kind of almost the same underneath as a lot of people were talking about a Red Wing app. It talks about you know, what you can see driving through Red Wing, and you know, what are the interesting points, and what have other people said about this, and what's the history, and there's a whole bunch of things up here, you know, on promoting Red Wing and
Outdoor
viewing, sharing, and interacting with events. I was going and taking some of these other things and saying, maybe all of these, you know, improving www.redwing.info, and you know, I'm just trying to bring some of these together from the other charts. So this kind of Red Wing app, and the idea of information along a route is kind of, has a lot in similarity to the public safety situational awareness underneath. So here's my thought, is if maybe there's one sort of technical group who goes and does this, and then we can demonstrate it two different ways. It could be demonstrated as both a, or maybe three ways. Maybe there's a public safety situational awareness demonstration, a civil air patrol version, and a Red Wing app version. Anyway, that was a thought I had. You may like it, you may not like it. I don't care. I'm just throwing out ideas. If any of them happen to stick, fine. Most of them will not stick. I understand that. That's okay. No problem. Let's see. We also had a whole bunch of stuff on education. And I pulled out some of these things. I thought connecting classrooms in China, as I told you last night, is rather innovative. I actually haven't heard of this before, and it makes sense to me. Minus the time zone problem. There's a big time zone problem, because having classes in session at both here in the United States and also in China at the same time is a difficulty. But assuming that, hey, the folks in China go to school for long school days, and maybe we could go and be, let's see, when would we would have to be available to be in their day, morning, afternoon. So maybe we could have some night classes or something here that could go and match up with some of the Chinese classes. I thought that would be interesting. The remote guidance counseling, I think, is a clear idea, because it follows along what some other communities have done in terms of remote nurse facility, because they can't assign nurses to schools. And that's really got a lot of traction. So the guidance counselor and the nurse might be somewhat the same, and therefore I think it's a great idea that other people will latch on to, and you can take the lead on. And then I noticed that this is probably video-oriented, and this is video-oriented, and there's another video one here, the video speed dating for jobs and business. Maybe the business registration could fit into that in some way. So there's video, and video here. And so maybe there's a video grouping where you get together and work on a, what I would suggest is that there is a product's the wrong word, there is some software out of Czechoslovakia called UltraGrid, which is a low latency video, and it works great over gigabit links. So it's really kind of transformational. It's very high quality. It uses the gigabit link for the capacity to send a lot of video information very quickly, and so you have a very low latency, very responsive video technology connection. Who was here at the Application Summit last year? Were you at the Application Summit? Did you go to the EVL, the Electronic Visualization Lab, and did you go to the room where we had the connection with, I think it was Poznan? Yes. That was the technology being used to bring Poznan into the room at 4K. So it's open source, and we can download it. And my guess is that with a little bit of technical expertise, maybe Jake's help, who knows what, you could go and get that working here, and then maybe be able to demonstrate it again in a few different ways, right? So we take one base technology, and we can have one group of folks doing it in a way where you can make a sort of a pitch around connecting classrooms in China. Somebody else could go and say, here's how we could do a guidance counseling session, and maybe model for us tomorrow a guidance counseling session using it. And somebody else could do some video speed dating simulation show how that would work.
What was the product called again? Sorry.
Ultragrid.cz.
Okay. Ultra Grid?
Yes, ultragrid.cz. So anyway, that was an idea. And again, I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just trying to toss out ideas that I think make sense. But that doesn't mean you have to be. Just an idea. Scheduling the classes and varying the parameters. Where are you, Jim? Yes. So we're talking about that this morning. I think that there's some very interesting ideas behind this. It turns out I had gone from here to supply chain logic. It turns out that he had gone from supply chain logic to scheduling. So there's obviously a duality there where this could also help with supply chain stuff as well as in scheduling classes. And as I said last night, I think there's a really interesting thing here in allowing people to take a look at the amount of flexibility built into a schedule and to understand what could happen if we would open up an additional lane for trucking, an additional classroom for students, an additional teacher, or what happens if we take away a morning session because of a delayed opening because of snow, understand where classes are going to be cut short, all of those interesting things. So if there's, I happen to like the idea, and we'll see how many other people want to work with Jim on that, but I think that there could be something, again, that could be pretty good that could come out of that. And I can imagine that if we use the servers back there to go and compute a schedule really quickly, and you could go for today, you could just kind of mock it to go and do something. You know, you probably couldn't do all the linear programming today, probably, but you could go and stub that out to do something, and then you could again have a highly interactive user interface that allows you to change some of the parameters and see how the schedule changes and some of the objectives of the schedule. You could see how that changes and works. Anyway, I thought that could be an interesting gig to get at. So that's that chart. And then there's two more over here. The real-time translation idea is, I think, a really interesting, good idea. There was a team that proposed this of students in Chattanooga who won the student competition for the idea, but they didn't actually do it. And it seems to me that this might be doable today. There's probably some kind of a voice recognition engine that you could work on to get working in almost real time, put it on a powerful server back there, and have it be doing the voice recognition. It could go and put out some text. And there's also, of course, things like Google Translate that will take the text and turn it into another language. So my guess is, in the day that you have today, you could probably go and find some voice recognition engine, hook it up to Google Translate, and as people would talk, you'd probably have to be into a microphone, high-quality audio. We could probably see a transcript come out in another language. And as for bonus points, if there's enough time or energy, you might be able to hook it up to a text-to-speech engine in that language. So, with the three things, a voice recognition, the translator, and the text-to-speech, all of which exist today, you could put them together in a chain, and then presumably somebody speaking in a microphone you could hear just like the tricorder on Star Trek. It's the universal translator. Sorry, not the tricorder, the universal translator. Here it's speaking in the other language. So I think that's actually doable. At least part of that can get done over 24 hours. So that sounds like a very interesting thing. And it seems like a TV station would want to cover that because it would be easy for people to understand what was going on, right? You're speaking in one language, you hear it in another language. Maybe a Native American language would be, very Red Wing-like. Yeah, maybe we could do Indian story time in the original language, but you hear it in English. Who knows? Again, I'm just tossing out ideas, right? If you like them, good. Run with them. If you don't like them, you can just ignore them. CAD. Here's my CAD person. CAD. So this remote CAD idea is a good idea. And they're doing this in Dublin, Ohio. And I bet you could come up with some really interesting use case here. And all you really need is a remote terminal access that works well over low latency. I think I mentioned last night that Microsoft Remote Desktop does that very nicely. And we use that in Kansas City for the Photoshop and Pro Tools apps. But you could use it for a CAD app. So you could download a 30-day free trial of AutoCAD something or another. The guy who created AutoCAD is my college roommate. He's retired and living in Switzerland. I'm still working for a living. So, you can go, I don't know if you're using AutoCAD or some other layout tool. I think you're using analog circuit boards, right? So, you wouldn't be using AutoCAD for that. You'd be using some other CAD tool. But I think a demonstration of using another CAD tool over a gigabit network where people could be working in their homes and be doing sort of very interesting rapid layout changes and flip the board around and show me what this looks like. I don't know. Multi-layer designs, I guess it's mostly digital as opposed to analog. You know much more about this than I do. But I think there's an interesting thing there where people in rural communities could be very productive people in terms of producing interesting CAD designs. So I think that'd be a great demo. So those are sort of what I have pulled out of this. But everybody is going to see this a bit differently. What am I missing? What should we go and add to these lists? Because you A, want to work on it, or B, you think it was such a great idea that maybe I just didn't understand it or I missed it. Yes?
I'm sitting here thinking about something that would be relevant to maybe the manufacturing side as well. But I have a SaaS business that is very document dependent, and SaaS in general is growing rapidly. One of the things that I think inhibits growth is that putting documents on an external server that's over across the internet, that latency or bandwidth is an issue. So Box.com has a downloadable software that interacts with their SaaS product, so you can modify Word documents that are stored on their platform. If there was a way we could make that as a plug-inable for across all different SaaS companies, so basically a service or an app that SaaS companies purchase, white label, it would really rapidly grow SaaS.
And if you're not in tune, he's saying SaaS is software as a service, I assume. So there's a lot of software as a service companies, Workforce, Salesforce.com being one of the most familiar examples. And so this would be a back-end service that those other SaaS companies could consume.
Yeah, it would have to be like their, an additional feature that they provide for their users. So you can actually, like, for mine, I do document management, and people put up PDF files, and that's not that big of a deal to be able to download. What if they can put up CAD files on the cloud, edit them locally, and then actually they automatically get saved? Whereas right now, you have to download, tweak it locally, and then you have to manually save it back. So there's a way to make a much more simple interface.
Yeah, I mean, you could even expand it to do something like recognizing when you're local versus when you're remote. So you could have, if your two coworkers are on the same network, those edits and shares go back on the local network instead of going all the way back. And there's kind of like that triage of edits. That'd be interesting. The synchronization on that is incredibly difficult, but it's certainly something to look at.
You want to give me a name for that? I'm trying to think of the three-word thing to put on the chart.
Well, it's essentially like, I don't know if we still are using WebDAV technology as a common thing, but basically a SaaS or WebDAV for SaaS.
All right. I actually know what that means. The use of WebDAV is way down, but it still exists out there. So that's a very interesting thing. Let me give you another possible idea here, is that I have all these PDF documents, And if I want to go and try to find the right one by looking at them, it just takes forever to open each one, right? I double click on it, and the Acrobat Reader 11 comes and eventually several seconds later opens it up, and I can look at the first page or two. If I had a really fast, what I like to do is kind of mouse over the entries in my file name list and see almost instantly the first page or two of that PDF document. Maybe that's pre-computed like a thumbnail is.
Oh, that would be actually really good. Like take the first maybe 4 or 5 pages, convert them to an image, serve that up before you hit the rest of PDF. Instead of using the big bandwidth as a crutch, you use it as with the latency as a...
Yep, that's exactly what I'm thinking.
Sorry.
No.
All this caffeine, woo, let's do this.
You ran in exactly the direction I was thinking. And that would be really generally useful because lots of stuff is stored in PDF these days.
It's doable with open source tools. There's plenty of open source tools to dissect PDF documents.
I'm going to call that a PDF previewer.
Yeah, a lot of software companies that are out there right now, like Scribd and other sources, they inject, process, put on their own advertising and push back to you in the hopes that it's low latency and works everywhere. But in reality, it's just, it's their business model. I can't make fun of it because it's a big multi-million-dollar business, but it's their business model. And if you can usurp them with something like this, it would be really cool.
What I'm about to do is to go on, there's 2 flip charts, the ones on the far ends here, and say how many people are interested in doing this, and if there's